Hi, it's Chris Watkin here, and today I'm joined by Lauren Scott, who is an estate agent from Whitley Bay in the northeast near Newcastle. And in 2019, she was the president of the National Association of Estate Agents. Lauren, thank you for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'd like to go through your story as an estate agent so we can teach the boys and girls out there in estate agency land um, what trials and tribulations, your fears, frustrations, your hopes and dreams of your estate agency journey, why you became an estate agent, why you decided to buy your own estate agency by borrowing £250,000 off your mother, the trials and tribulations of when the recession hit, and unfortunately you also got cancer at the same time, and then the follow on through on how you got through all that to the place where you became the president of the National Association of Estate Agents, and the fact that while it is tough out there, you are flying as an agent. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. First thing first is, when did you know that you wanted to become an estate agent?
Well, like many of us, I didn't wake up and think, you know what, I would like to be an estate agent. It wasn't even anywhere in my mind. My passion was horses. So when I went to university, I studied equine science and worked with horses, and that's what I wanted to do. But I quickly realised that I wasn't going to make a lot of money doing that, and I was always very driven. And while I was at university, I had a Saturday job at Your Move in Whitley Bay. And I used to make more in commission than the full-timers, and realised that actually I absolutely love this. I'm really good at it. So instead of someone else paying me to look after their horse, I thought, you know what, I want to make a career out of this. I want to succeed. I want to make a lot of money, and I'm really good at it. And I loved it. So when I finished my university course, I decided to go full-time in agency. That's what I did. So I worked for a couple of corporates and then got an opportunity to work for a company called Trading Places, who was an independent mortgage brokers.
Okay, let's bring it back. With regard to you wanting to become an estate agent, how did your parents feel that they basically helped you through your university career? 3 years, it's not cheap, for almost not to throw it away, but to almost say, well, I'm not going to do anything with horses, I just want to be an estate agent.
Mum was delighted actually, because when I started embarking on what type of role within the equine industry, and I did try a lot. I tried the racing industry, the breeding, the teaching. So I toe dipped in a lot, and a lot of it is minimum wage. You can't make any more money. It's early
Even with a
mornings.
degree?
Even with a degree, it's very, very, very difficult. So Mum, again, she paid for private education and was saying, you know, I've paid all this money for your education. This is not what I expected of you. You know, why don't you think about doing something else? You're so good at selling. You're so good working with people. Why don't you give it a go? And that was one of the main reasons. My mum was always a huge inspiration to me. So,
And you said you were driven. Which side of the family does that come from?
from my mum,
Okay.
yeah.
What's your dad brought to the party?
Well, my dad's passed away now. He
Okay, sorry to
passed
hear
away
that.
in 2004. And I didn't have a lot of contact with my dad from when I was about 16. He was a hard worker. He worked on the oil rigs. So that's how he passed away. He was in a helicopter crash. But I was always with my mum, and my mum was always my inspiration to
So
me.
your dad taught you hard work, and your mum's the driven one, and that's why you pushed yourself where you did.
Yeah, absolutely. My mum was a single mum for a long time, and she worked her way up from leaving school, being a nurse, and now she's a director of nursing. And it was just how driven she was, how much she studied and wanted to be at the top of her game. And watching that was incredible.
Do you think you've got a lot to thank your mum for with regard to the way you are driven in terms of when you watched her as a child?
Every day I'm grateful. Yeah.
Okay, so you said you went to work for a couple of corporates. We went to work for Your Move, and then you said you joined a independent agents? Was it called trading?
It was trading places, mortgage brokers, and originally I went for an interview to work alongside the mortgage brokers because again I was thinking I'm in this industry, where do I want to be?
How old were you at this time?
I was 90, no I wasn't, sorry, I was 21,
Okay.
21 at the time. And the woman who owned the business had said, listen, I've looked at your CV, I've spoken to you, you're an agent through and through, will you set up an estate agency for me with my money? I thought, oh my goodness, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
As a you say a 19-year-old?
21.
21, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I did. So I set that up for Lynn. She was, you know, she loved property and she was a property investor herself, but she was mainly focused on mortgages. And so I grew the business for Lynn. That was in a place called Ponte. And
Well, that's the posh part of Newcastle,
it
isn't it?
is. It's the fabulous part
Yes.
of Newcastle, the very expensive houses. And so I worked alongside Lynn. And in 2007, Lynn said she was selling the business. And I was devastated because I'd put years of
So how old were you by then at 2007?
23.
23.
Yeah.
So you basically got her estate agency off the ground,
Yeah.
and then she decided to sell it.
She decided to sell the business.
2007, so that's just before the crash.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So I went to my mum and said, Lynn's selling the business. We're doing really, really well. Would you like to invest in the business and me? Lend me the money, please. And I begged her. I said, you'll be able to retire early. We'll be able to make all this money. Will you lend me the money? And she did. So we had a good start. We had a good couple of months. So in the Ponte area, at the time, you had the self-cert mortgages, you had the footballers buying the houses, and the average house price was anywhere from 800,000 up to 2-3 million.
Okay.
So the commissions were fabulous when they were there. And that was the real pull for me, those type of clientele, those type of fees. And then it all went horribly wrong. Northern Rock crashed, and overnight we went from making no money. We didn't sell a house in 18 months. It was horrific, and that was across the board in the area. They pulled the self-cert mortgages, which was crippling for that level of property. The footballers, who were the main investors in the area, they just started renting in-house or between each other. And estate agents were saying, don't buy, the market's crashing, do not buy. So that was a hit on the market as well. And at the time, I had absolutely no lettings book. We were sales only, so we had no property management.
So you paid £250,000 for an estate agency business with no lettings.
Yes.
Do you think in hindsight that was a little naive?
It was very naive, but I was 23 years old and I didn't have the knowledge that I had now. I would never, ever, if I had the knowledge I had now, goodness me, I would never have made that decision. I could have probably set the business up myself for 20,000. But at the time, I thought that's what was right. And that has been my biggest challenge to date, because that money wasn't just loaned from a bank.
Yeah, because you could have just thrown the keys and said,
could have just said, that's it, I'm giving up. It was from my mum, who's literally my world. So she was my biggest
and not
push.
selling one house for 18 months.
Yeah.
How did you feel at that time? Because did you have staff at this time?
I did have staff, yeah. I mean, at the first we had the pipeline, which was great. And I had to just be very reactive and think, what am I going to do? And what I did was I reached out to Propertymark, to Arla, and I did the level 3 in the training in 6 weeks. So very, very quickly, I sat every course that I could and made sure that I knew exactly what I was doing, set up a client account and started building very quickly the lettings, because although the sales dropped off, people still had to move. And the good news is the rental values are very high. So if you got even a tenant fined, it was a really good fee.
So even though you were not putting any sales fees in, because you basically turned on a sixpence and taught yourself how to be a letting agent.
Yeah.
That's what paid the bills.
That's what paid the bills. That is what saved us completely, and the support that I got from Propertymark, which is why I hold them so dear today. I didn't want to just do it off a whim. I wanted to make sure I was correctly trained because I know it's a minefield.
Okay.
So that's what I did.
Okay, but if you don't mind me saying, most estate agents make absolutely appalling letting agents because of the detail and things like that. How did you find you were able to understand that and more importantly love it? Because it is a love, isn't it?
It is a love, and you know what I do? Today, my business is equal sales and lettings, and I just wear two hats. It's exhausting, I must say, to be able to jump from that to that to that to that. But I do it, and I love each part of it. I love working with the landlords, the tenants. I love their stories. I love being on a journey with a tenant and being with them for many, many years. The same with the landlord, helping with their portfolios. So I get joy out of both sides of the business, and I always have.
Now, this is at the time when you were diagnosed with cancer.
Yes. So that was just in 2008. Began to get a little bit poorly. Couldn't really work out what it was. And at the time, I was too young to have a smear test. And the GP that I've had is incredible. She's looked after me from a little girl. She did all sorts of tests and said, the only thing I haven't done is a smear test, and you're not old enough for one, unfortunately. She said, but I don't care, I'm going to do one anyway. Within 3 days, I was back in hospital, and I had cancer, and it was a very aggressive type of cancer. So I was, within 14 days, I was in surgery. So that was terrifying because not only was I trying to train, I was trying to bring business in, I was trying to work. My mum was so worried about me. And it was probably one of the lowest times of my life. It was really, really tough, the unknowing, and the whole cancer word is just terrifying.
Because at this point you were still on your own, weren't you?
Yes, I'm still on my own.
So there was no one to support you?
No, other than my mum. No, didn't have anyone to support me. So yes, it was a tough time. But I'm a fighter. I've always been a fighter. And although every day was a struggle, I kept on going and kept on going, kept on out. And I never took a long time off work. I had 4 lots of surgery. And thankfully, within 12 months, I got the all clear. And then I was looked at every 3 months, which is hard as it is because it's not just you're cured and that's it. Every 3 months, you're going back for the checks. And every 3 months you're thinking, is it back? So you never really get away from it.
Do you still have your every 3 months now?
Not every 3 months, thankfully now. I'm on 6 monthly now. So
do you still have those same fears of, I wonder if it's come back?
You do, yeah. And I think I always will. And even when you speak to someone else who unfortunately has had a diagnosis, it brings it all back, the fear. And it's tough.
Does it get slightly better every time? Or is it the same intensity of fear? And
over time, you kind of get used to it, the fear. It never ever goes away. And then something might happen, and then you get that dread again to think, is it coming back? Like I've managed to have 2 children. Very, very grateful for that. But that wasn't easy because I have no cervix at all. So I nearly lost the first baby, and I had to have emergency surgery and have to be sutured. So to keep the baby in, I had him premature. And had to have an emergency section. So that was terrifying. So every week I had to go back into hospital to have internal scans to make sure I was still able to carry the baby. They didn't know whether I was going to get to 24 weeks. So all of that brought back the feelings of the cancer. It was the same sort of thing. So it was terrifying.
Meanwhile, you're trying to run an estate and letting agency
with no business partner yet.
And no actual partner as well,
yeah.
And having the debt of your mum
yes.
on your shoulders, because I'm sure you probably weren't starting to pay that back too much because you obviously have to pay the staff.
Absolutely, and there wasn't profit being made. It washed its face for the years, but it never really made a profit. So
how did that relationship with your mother change because of that almost sword of Damocles?
So it's been up and down, to be honest. A lot of it my fault because after I had the cancer, the weirdest thing happened, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. So I was so strong, got through the cancer, then got the all clear, and then thought, you know what, life's too short. I'm going to do what I want. I was a little bit more reckless. I was traveling a lot when I should have been concentrating more on the business. And from mum, she was worried because she was thinking, you need to be focused. You've managed to get over this cancer hurdle. Now you need to be focused on the business.
But you thought, sod it, I'm going to
I
enjoy
thought,
life.
sod it, I nearly died. I'm off. I want to be here. And I was so focused on quality of life and lifestyle. I was thinking, should I do properties in Dubai? So I was jetting over to Dubai. You know, instead of really concentrating on getting the core strong of the business.
How are your staff feeling at this point? Were they behind you?
I've been really lucky with my staff through everything, through the cancer, through the children. So they've always been very supportive, I must say.
But their boss was flying around the country with, you know, with gay abandon, thinking, sod it. Probably drinking and having fun, you know.
Yes, yeah.
Were they okay with that?
They were all right, yeah. They didn't complain too much. I think they thought I was a barrel of laughs at the time, so I don't think they complained too much. So I think that I must say that has been the only upset between mum and I. The other challenge has been when I have been completely. So that was only, I must say, a very short period, 6 months. That was it. After that, I was literally back on my knees, working every hour God sent. I didn't have the children at the time. So I was able to do 16-hour days, 7 days a week. And I asked for the business. I wasn't scared, asked for the business. And I built the portfolios up.
Okay.
And
You're still in Ponteland at this point?
I was still at Ponteland at this point, yeah.
Okay.
And at some stages, I was so stressed and so worn out. Mum was saying, you know what, I don't want the money back. Shut the business. Because it was hard. We had the double dip reception, right? So it was hard work.
I mean, in London, as you know, it was really good after 2011, but you guys, you did have a dip.
We thought it was going to get better, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're on your knees again. So it was just felt like there was no light at the end of the tunnel, but I kept on going, kept on working. And I think it was when I had my first child, and obviously I'm my mum's child. She was worried about me with the pregnancy after was bringing her feelings back with the cancer and everything. And she was saying, you know what, sweetheart, just jack it in. You can go and work for somebody else without all this stress and make a really good living. But for me, that is not me. I don't give up on things. I don't give up on anything. And I kept on going and kept on going.
Do you think in hindsight was the right thing to do?
Yes.
Well, I mean, what was your lowest point, you know, once you'd, you know, with the double dip? I mean, 08 was the first one, and then was it 12, 13?
12, 13, yeah.
Okay. What was your lowest point in 12, 13?
So for me, I was a new mother with a premature baby, which was tough. And I couldn't do what I used to do. I knew if I had to make £2,000 that week, I could go out, I could find a business, I could find a new landlord, I could make that money to pay those bills. Because we were struggling hand to mouth. Everything got paid, but a lot of the time at the second dip, it was sometimes tougher than the first one, you know. And when you've got a baby who's relying on you and you're exhausted, it's really tough to do that. So for me, that was probably my lowest point.
Did you feel guilty in any way that you were trying to be a mother, a partner, and a boss?
You feel guilty every day, because if you're spending time with the little one, you're not supporting the staff and the business, you're not supporting your partner enough because then they don't get the attention. And then I always try to find time for myself. My passion's horses, so it still is horses. And for me, it's a huge thing to be able to get away a few times a week, spend time just me and my horse. And that for me is the best therapy. However, I do beat myself up over it because I always feel like I need to be doing something with work, or I should be doing something with the children. But I also know that for me to be the best person that I can be, I need some me time.
What advice would you give to people, especially women who are juggling these plates? And I know that's not a question I would ask a man, but and I don't specifically want to do a separate video about women in the estate agency because, let's be honest, we've done those to death. But I particularly want to know is how have you got better at spinning plates and not being so guilty?
I
Yeah,
think,
because like a
yeah.
Pratt, you went to, and we'll get to it in a second, you went to put your hand up to be president of National Association of Estate Agents.
Yes.
Well, but how have you got better at that as a woman?
So for me, it's all about being the best person I can be. So being full of enthusiasm, for being full of happiness. Because if I'm happy, everybody around me is happy. My team's happy, my kids are happy, my mum's happy, my husband's happy. And so I need to make sure that I'm happy. And when I'm happy and I can be organised, then everybody's happy. So the time I spend with my children is quality time. The time I spend with my husband is quality time. The time that I make for me is quality time. And as long as I can do that and I can be organised, then everybody gets a little bit of that.
Would you say that's a tip that you'd give to everyone out there in the estate agency and letting agency?
Absolutely, because if you don't care for yourself and make sure that this one person is able to cope and is happy, you can't then make everybody else happy.
When did you become aware of that needed to happen?
When did I become aware of it? Possibly when I didn't have time for myself and I became miserable. I must say I did become miserable. And if I was miserable, then you don't want to be happy and have that time.
But when did it become, there's plenty of miserable people out there that don't have self-awareness that they are miserable or affecting other people's. Was there something specific that someone said to you where you think, shit?
I think I just looked at myself and thought, that's not the best person you can be. That's not you. I'm generally a very happy, positive person, and I like to give, and I like to make everybody else around me happy. That's what I've been like since I was a child. And you can feel when things are starting to be strained with your husband, with the children. If you're getting snappy with them, well, really, it shouldn't be like that. You should have all of the time in the world, and the time that you do get to spend together, it should be precious. And yes, there's times when you think, oh my goodness, you're being a bit snappy, that's not you. So I always say, all I need is some time to myself.
Go out hacking with the horse.
Go out hacking with the horse. I come back, I'm a new woman. I'm fine. I can deal with anything. And it was particularly after my second child, who was a nightmare when he was born, cried the whole time for the first 16 weeks. And all I needed was 1 hour a day. That's what I was allowed. 1 hour a day. It's all I needed. And I would come back a new woman and I could deal with it again.
When was your second child born?
2017.
Okay. But like a fool, you went to put your hand up to be president in 2017 to be the president-elect or what, vice president. I don't know how you've got more presidents in the army than you have than an African country.
Yes, we have indeed. I did. Well, it all goes back to 2007 when I needed help, and for me, Propertymark was there. Whether it be the regional meetings or whether it be the training, I survived because of Propertymark. So I was asked to be a regional representative, and I just loved that togetherness.
When was that?
That was 2014.
Okay, so you became the rep for the North East.
The rep for the North East, yeah.
Okay.
And because I'm on my own, I'm an independent. I don't have people to call upon to say, I'm having this trouble. What do I do here? When I became part of that network and that association, I had that, whether it was picking up the phone or sitting around having dinner. And that support network for me was huge. Meeting people like David, everybody, it was just fantastic. And I felt that I needed to give something back to the association that saved me. And that's why I did it. And I also wanted to help people who were in my position, who were on their own and needed that support. So when I was asked, we think that you'd be great, will you do it? I thought, I'm not sure if I could. I've got the children, I've got the business. Okay. Spoke to my husband and he said...
Because you were quite young at this time, weren't you?
Yes.
29?
Yeah. I was 29, yeah. No, I wasn't 29, I was 31.
31?
Yeah.
That's quite young.
Quite young, yes. I was at the time the youngest ever female president.
Okay.
And I had big shoes to fill, Katie Griffin is incredible and has always been
Big in the game.
she's big in the game and
Big in the game.
big shoes to fill, and I would never try and fill them. But again, she was a huge inspiration to me, as was Jan Heitch, who I sat on the board with. And again, Jan is huge on education, which I'm so passionate about. And I thought, you know what, I could really connect with these younger people and try, and that's why I'm push on the apprenticeship side, and try and get that young talent into the industry instead of people just falling into it by mistake. So I thought, you know what, I could try and make a difference. If I can give it my all for 12 months, try and make a difference, why not?
Okay.
So that's what I did.
But it's quite a time burgle being president, isn't it?
Yes. Bearing in mind my little one was only, goodness me, 5 months old at the time.
Okay. I mean, who looked after the children when you were gallivanting around the country?
So my team, who are my mum and my husband, were incredible. At first, my husband came with me a few times, but it was tough because we've got the older child, so it's dropping him off at school. I couldn't take him out of school, but on a few occasions, Mum had my older boy Noah, and Johnny came with me with Jessie, and although it sounded great at the time, it was exhausting for him. We didn't want to sit in a hotel room with a little one, and when I was at meetings, so we just had to get on with it, and he literally was incredible through it. He was amazing. But when I was home, I had to spend time with them and quality time with them. And for the kids, always made sure that we FaceTimed, that they got a present when I came home, and it worked.
Do you think you'd do it again?
Probably, because I'm that type of person. I don't regret doing it at all. I met some incredible people. I learned so much. For me, it was like a 12-month kind of training course. I got to go to the biggest events. I got to meet the most incredible people who I'm lucky enough to call friends and can call upon if I need to. So I got a lot from it as well, with the networking that I did and with the training that I got. But I also feel like I did give quite a lot and work as hard as I possibly could for Propertymark.
You say you were in Whitley Bay, which is on the coast. Why did you move from Ponte to Whitley Bay?
So I was born and bred in Whitley Bay, and Ponte I fell upon when I bought the business from Lynn, and I always found it a struggle because I wasn't from there. It was, I didn't grow up there. I didn't have any family contacts, and in this game, it's all about especially when you're small independent, who you know. And I was offered to open a second branch in Whitley Bay.
Who offered you?
A landlord who I knew. There's a vacant unit. Do you want to come to Whitley Bay? And I thought, let's do it. My husband said, I'm 100% behind you, Lauren. Go for it. So I opened the two. I live in Whitley Bay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you open up the second office?
I opened up the second office in 2014.
They say opening up the second office can actually be the worst thing you can ever do.
Well, yeah, and it was, because especially when I am the face of my business, people want to deal with me, and I felt that I was just literally torn between the two branches, and it was a real struggle. And within the first 6 months of trading, I made probably more than I'd made in 2 years at Ponte, and it was a no-brainer. I thought, I can get out of this lease. Somebody else wanted to take the lease over in Ponte, and I thought, I'm just going to stick in Whitley Bay. And I still had the lettings portfolio in Ponte, which I kept, but it was a no-brainer for me. And it was just a totally different market.
Do you think, in hindsight, if you still stopped in Ponteland, I know I called it different, sorry, from the south, Ponteland, it's my little phrase, you'd still be in business today if you were just still there and only there?
Don't know. It's hard.
Are you enjoying the job more because you're now back in your hometown?
I love it. And you know what it could be as well, Chris? I had a really tough time in Ponteland, and there was a real cloud over me from day one of buying the business, whether it was the constant recession that I was in while I was there, the cancer. I still worked there when I lost my father as well, you know, which was before I bought the business, but I was still there. So there was just a catalogue of events that were quite a negative effect on my life. I still went to work every day, but it was just...
Was it like a shadow or a cloud?
It was a shadow and a cloud, you're right, yeah. And I felt that when I went to Whitley Bay, it was a real fresh start. And, you know, I felt people knew me and liked me and wanted to do business with me. So I was constantly being contacted to say, oh, Lauren, you're on the coast now. Could you sell my mum's house, or could you come and have a look at mine? I've got these rental properties. So it was just a total game changer for me.
So do you think for the agents watching this, working in the town that you live in is really important?
Yes, and getting on with the people and being a figure in the town is absolutely important, because let's face it, estate agency is all about trust and likability in the person.
It's about people, isn't
It's
it?
about people. And if people like the person, you're on to a good steading already to win the business and to have the opportunity of even trying to go for the business. So yes, to anyone out there, you know, that is definitely what I would recommend.
So a big tip for you, do think long and hard before you start your own second agency. I'm a firm believer that, because I've seen so many people do it, the only two reasons you should open a second office and be successful is if you have a joint director who you can split between yourselves, but there's only one of you, wasn't there? And the second one is if you have a mini-me.
Yes, yeah.
Who basically is, you know. Final few questions. If there was one decision that you would change as an estate agent, what would it have been?
Buying the business.
Okay. And what's been your proudest moment as an estate agent?
I think the day I stood up at the Savoy and addressed the membership on my inaugural day of being president, that for me was huge, absolutely huge.
Okay.
So it was incredible.
You've got another 30 years to work with the age that you are.
Yeah.
What's the future for Lauren Scott?
So at the moment, I am very content within my business. My business isn't huge. It's manageable for me. What I like to provide is a really good service, make a good living, and be happy. I don't want to be the number one. I've got the most properties to sell, because I couldn't manage to do that job effectively. So for me now, I've got the perfect balance. If I've got a great team, I've got a great home-life balance and work balance, and I'm very happy to continue how I'm going at the moment. I'm still involved very much with Propertymark, the educational side, and also with the Urban Trust. So I'm very happy to still give back to the industry. But yeah, I'm a pretty happy chappy at the moment, just cracking on the way I am.
Thank you for your time today, Lauren. You've been inspirational, and I hope you boys and girls out there in estate agency land have learned something from Lauren. Don't beat yourself up. I think that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Be aware of your weaknesses and your strengths.
Look after yourself.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
And if you don't look after yourself, how can you expect to look after everyone else?
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time today. You've been a star.
Thank you so much.